for reviewing federal regulations and for providing the proper oversight of federal agencies. No small tasks. For the past 10 years, Ms. Tanden has served as the president and CEO of the Center for American Progress. Prior to that, she worked in the United States Senate as a legislative director and served in the Obama and Clinton administrations as a senior domestic policy advisor. Good morning, Ms. Tanden, and thanks very much for being with us. Before I go further, let me mention that we have some new members of this committee, and let me welcome Senators Lujan, Padilla, Sass, and Romney to the Budget Committee. This committee has very broad jurisdiction dealing with any policy that impacts the federal budget. That's a lot of stuff out there. And at a time when our country faces an unprecedented series of crises, this will be a very active committee in which we will be exploring many issues, including trying to get an understanding of what is happening to the working class of this country, the middle class, and lower income Americans. And I hope we're going to have those good discussions in a civil manner. The American people need to hear different points of view. They need to get an understanding of why what is happening in this country is in fact happening. In general, we don't do a good job as members of Congress. The media doesn't do a good job. And I hope this committee will have civil, serious debates about some of the most important issues facing America. We are going to explore what it means that in this country today, the people on the top economically are doing phenomenally well, while so many tens of millions of Americans are struggling right now in America to put food on the table, to pay their rent, or to have the income they need to go to a doctor in the midst of a pandemic. Today in America, we are living through the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression and the worst public health crisis in more than 100 years. Real unemployment is over 11%. Over 23 million Americans are either unemployed, underemployed, or have given up looking for work altogether. Unbelievably, more than half of American workers are living paycheck to paycheck and are just one medical emergency, one car accident, one lost paycheck away from financial disaster. In America, disgracefully, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. The COVID-19 pandemic is still raging across the nation and is responsible for taking the lives of more than 450,000 Americans. And obviously, all of us hope that we're going to address that crisis as rapidly as possible. But meanwhile, in the midst of that pandemic, over 90 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured, and we remain the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all of our people. We've got a climate crisis that is ravaging nations all over the world, including the United States of America. We have an affordable housing crisis where so many of our people are literally paying half of their incomes for rent. We have a racial injustice crisis in America today that this Congress is going to have to address, and we have an immigration crisis as well. And given all of these unprecedented crises, it is absolutely imperative that we have an OMB Director who has the courage at this moment in American history to think big, not small. We need an OMB Director who is prepared to stand up to powerful special interests who dominate the economic and political life of this country, including what goes on here in Congress. We need an OMB Director who can work with the President and Congress to create an economy that works for all of us and not just wealthy campaign contributors. Now, Ms. Tanden, at a time when the wealthy and large corporations have extraordinary influence over the economic and political life of this country, I must tell you that I am concerned about the level of corporate donations that the Center for American Progress has received under your leadership. According to the Washington Post, since 2014, Center for American Progress has received at least $38 million from corporate America, including Wall Street and every special interest that I can think of. So before I vote on your nomination, it is important for me and members of this committee to know that those donations that you have secured at CAP will not influence your decision-making at the OMB. Further, I would like to hear how you plan to work with this committee and the Congress to enact the promises that President Biden made to the American people. I think one of the reasons that so many people are disillusioned with politics in America, given up on democracy, politicians make promises and they run away from those promises. President Biden made a series of promises, and I'm going to work with him to make sure that we implement those promises. President Biden promised to raise the minimum wage over a period of several years to at least $15 an hour. He promised to make public colleges and universities tuition-free for working families and to substantially reduce student debt. He promised to lower the Medicare eligibility age from 65 down to 60 and to also cut the outrageously high prices of prescription drugs in America. President Biden promised to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure and create millions of good-paying jobs and combat climate change. He said he would fight to make pre-K universal, to make sure that every 3- and 4-year-old in America has the quality child care and pre-K education that they need. President Biden promised to make sure that every worker in America has at least 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. And yes, President Biden promised that he would make sure that corporations like Amazon began to pay their fair share of taxes. The next OMB Director will play a major role in determining whether those policy proposals succeed or whether they fail. And I want to hear from you this morning how you plan to work with the President, this committee, and the Congress to implement those promises that the President made. Lastly, what I simply want to say is that over the years, I worked with Mike Enzi, who was then the chairman, and Mike and I had a very, very good relationship. And I look forward to having an excellent relationship, a cordial relationship with the ranking member, Lindsey Graham, who I've known for many, many years. I hope, again, that this committee can be the committee that has serious, look, we have differences of opinion. We all know that. But let's have a civil debate, and I promise you that we're going to talk about the most important issues that face your constituents. So let's do that, and with that, let me introduce the ranking member, Lindsey Graham.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on being chairman of the committee. 2020 was a heck of an election cycle. It will soon be over, hopefully, in my lifetime, and we can move on with the nation's business. I've talked to Bernie several times about what we can do together, and there actually is a lot we can do together. I look forward to that. Senator Whitehouse is sort of on the fence about climate change, but if we can ever get him out of his shell, I would like to talk about what happens if General Motors by 2035 actually converts to all electrical vehicles. I mean, that's not, you know, some left-wing group saying that. That's the General Motors saying that in 2035, I think it is that the date, or 2050, I can't remember now, that they're going to stop producing gasoline-driven cars. Well, what does that mean for the country? Why are they trying to do that? And it gives us a chance, I think, to talk about big things. And there's going to be differences. Senator Sanders went down a checklist of big things, and one of my goals is to make sure that all these big things that we're talking about, other people paying for, that we have a sense of, you know, how do you pay for all this stuff? And from a Republican point of view, we can't really say a whole lot about running up the debt because we did it too. But eventually, it's going to take people like Bernie and Lindsey and the rest of us around here to figure out what to do about the debt one day. I don't know when that day comes, but there'll be a day of reckoning. And I know Senator Whitehouse and Kane and others have been pretty open-minded about reforms. From my point of view, that would be revenue too. Make sure that the revenue is consistent with what we need up here to operate the government. But from Senator Sanders, I just want to tell you that we're going to have some real stark differences about reconciliation. We're going to have some very pointed differences. But the one thing I want to say about Bernie is that you believe what you're saying. You've been the most consistent voice in this body, and the one thing I respect is people who believe what they're saying. Senator Whitehouse, you believe what you're saying about climate change. And the question is, can we find some common ground given what we believe? We have some very talented people on our side of the aisle, and I would just challenge all of us to fight for our, without peacefully, that's the new word now, fight for your point of view, but see if there's some common ground here because the country needs it. As to the nominee, I've known her for a while, very nice person, but not the unity pick that I was looking for anyway. So Ms. Tanden was receiving corporate donations, which is fine with me. I don't mind if you receive corporate donations as long as they're lawful and fully disclosed. And I think all of us receive donations from different groups. That doesn't mean you're owned because somebody gives you money. So I'm not going to hold that against you. But you've been a very partisan figure. You've been a very tough figure when it comes to political discourse, and that's okay too. But calling Mitch McConnell Moscow Mitch is probably not a very good thing to say. Suggesting that the minority leaders somehow in the pocket of the Russians. The GOP's capacity for evil knows no bounds. I'm sure a lot of people in America believe that. I'm not one of them. So Senator Sanders was Hillary Clinton's opponent, as we all know. So her scorn was not limited to Republicans. Russia did a lot more to help Bernie than the DNC's random internal emails did to help Hillary. Oddly, when Russia was trying to elect Trump, they did not attack Bernie Sanders. They chose to help him. They did this in the Democratic primary. They attacked the other candidate. I doubt if Bernie was Russia's pick either. So the point I'm trying to make here is that in a time of unity, we're picking somebody who throws sharp elbows. And there's going to be a consequence for that, hopefully on our side. As to her management capability, she referred to us for the Glassdoor review of her time of running the Center for American Progress. Again, she's a talented person, has come a long way in life, but here's some of the reviews. June 2019, 1 out of 5 stars. Terrible, absolutely horrible. October 2016, cool work but absurd management. Disapproves of CEO. April 2016, influential organization poorly managed. September 2012, 2 out of 5 stars, bad management. February 13th, 2 out of 5 stars, great experience, terrible management. 2 out of 5 stars, April 2017, disapproves of CEO, doesn't recommend, what a mess. So all I can say is that this is not the unifying pick that I was looking for this position. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.